So, good afternoon to you. Welcome again from Vine Evangelical Church here in Sevenoaks. Today I'm Ian and I'll be interviewing Beverley South. So, thank you all for watching and listening, and thank you, Beverley, for coming along to join us. Will we hear about Beverley's upbringing, and will it be a little more conventional than we heard from Glenn, the pastor, last time? I think so. So let's jump on in and find on out. So Beverley, thank you once again for agreeing to go through this process, and why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and what led you to become a member of Vine Evangelical Church here?
Well, I was born in South London, and then I went to school quite normally and everything. And then when I was about 14, my father's company relocated up to the Midlands.
Okay. What was his company? What did his company do?
The company he worked for were in engineering.
Right.
At that time, lots of companies were moving out of the southeast and going up north. I stayed up there for about a year or so. I wasn't very happy. In between going up there, my friend arranged a blind date with Paul, who everybody knows, and the result was...
Paul's Beverley's husband, if that's not immediately clear.
And then I came back, and then about a year or so later we got married. We bought our first house in Uckfield, and we lived there for a couple of years. That house was God's provision, even though we didn't know it at the time, because we were quite young. I was 18 and Paul was around about 20, I think.
So you got married quite young then, at 18?
Yeah. And then we didn't really have very much money saved for a house. But anyway, Paul had seen this advert in the paper. So he went to, spoke to his boss at work, and they said, well, go down. So Paul went down to Uckfield. I'd never heard of the place. I don't think Paul had. And anyway, he looked around the building site, and that he didn't realise there was just 2 houses left. And when he knocked on the door, the house was full of squatters. People were queuing and kind of reserving their spot by staying overnight in the show house.
Wow.
So that's what Paul did. He stayed overnight in the show house, got our first...
So there was huge demand just for these 2 remaining houses.
That was Friday. Saturday morning they woke up, and unfortunately there was a queue of people outside but no houses for them. So anyway, we lived there for a couple of years. Then
so you got that house then?
Yeah.
Despite there being a huge demand?
Of course. Nan helped us with some money, and I don't know, we just got money. It sounds silly. When I look back, I don't know how it happened, but we got the house, and we stayed there for a couple of years because we both worked in Croydon, and the train fares were like having a second mortgage, so we thought we'd cut our losses, and we moved to Biggin Hill. Paul, I can't quite remember how, but Paul got to know people in Biggin Hill who were from the Biggin Hill Baptist Church, and he became great friends with them. And they were all, because Biggin Hill at that time was quite small, quite villagey, so there was lots of people there. And the result was Paul came to know God there. But I wasn't, particularly bothered. I think if I look back upon it,
so when you were when you got married, then Beverley, neither of you were
no.
Christians then.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
So, in fact, we didn't even get married in the church. We just got married in the registry.
Right.
And, I thought, we saved the money, and what's the point? So that's what we did. So Paul became a Christian, and I wasn't, overly interested. But and then a couple of years after being in Biggin Hill, I became pregnant, and I vaguely, because I had to give up work because of health issues, I got to know our neighbours and the people from the church who I now realise were, apart from being very, very friendly, were praying for me.
Oh.
And, you know, were doing their utmost to get, you know, to introduce me to God and, you know, have a relationship with him and get to know him as my Lord and Saviour.
And how did you feel about it at the time? Were you resistant or were you open or...?
Well, I didn't go to church with Paul at that time. I think, if I'm truthful, I'd say I was a little bit against it, possibly aggressive. You know, I just didn't want to know. And then...
But you were okay that Paul went?
Well, he went. I made a bit of a fuss sometimes.
Right.
Anyway, he was quite determined, so he went. And then one evening, Paul had gone to an evening meeting, and he...
Whilst you were still pregnant at the time, or had you...
I was at home.
Yeah.
And he was talking to people, and he could overhear conversation, and each conversation seemed to have the word home or go home. So anyway, he left the meeting early and he came home, and I really wasn't very well. And he prayed with me, and he actually brought me through with the final prayer to know God, to know Jesus.
Right.
Which, if I can then sort of fast forward about 10 days, was the best thing ever, because I woke up one morning, because I had to go into hospital at that point to have bed rest, because my blood pressure had got so high.
Oh.
And then one morning I woke up, and the nurse had come to do the obs, she had a fit and went rushing off to get her superior nurse, and the result was an emergency caesarean. So Paul was at work, and he obviously, they phoned him and told him what had happened. And while I was having the caesarean, I had a very bad, severe reaction to the drug that just relaxes you to allow the muscles to relax, so they can take the baby out of you. And I stopped breathing, and my heart stopped and everything. So it was a bit of a major panic. So and Paul and our pastor, Ray Lowe, were sitting in the corridor waiting, you know, chatting or waiting. And Paul was really, you know, quite calm and smiling, and it seems that the doctor had to take Paul to one side to say, you know, do you realise this is really serious? And Paul said, no, it's going to be all right. I bought the pram this morning, you know, it's going to be all right. So I was in the intensive care, and I thought I was waking up, but I actually, well, I was kind of in limbo, I suppose, because I thought, it's a bit dark in here, I can hear what's going on, but I can't open my eyes, what's that? And then I realised I couldn't open my eyes, I couldn't even make a noise to say I could hear what they were saying. I couldn't move my limbs or anything. So, this is a bit scary. So, bearing in mind, in my Christian life, I was like 8 days old, I suppose, so I was a baby. And then I just knew that I had to trust in God, and because it was total darkness, I was like suspended in total darkness. I couldn't communicate at all, and it was absolutely horrible. All I could do was hear the nurses talking to me, telling me I'd had a daughter and blah blah blah. And Paul came along and he sat with me and he held my hand and chatted and that. And I was just praying to God, you know, to help me and things. And then I got to the point...
So at this point, if I've got this right, you were 8 days into to knowing about God and knowing God.
Yeah, I'd have it starting.
But you'd started praying at a point where it sounds like you almost lost your life.
Well, they didn't know what the outcome was going to be, because Joanna's almost 44, so in some ways we're talking about the dark ages, because technology has moved on so far. And at that time I had her in the Old Farnborough Hospital, and they didn't even have a scanning machine. I was going to go up to London that particular day to have a scan. So it really was, the dark ages.
Yeah.
So, and I just prayed and chatted to God, and I felt relaxed and calm. And then Paul said he'd chosen some names, and he thought about Isabel, Ruth, and I was lying there in total darkness thinking to myself, I think that name, Paul, nothing that name. Anyway, then Paul went, and he went home, and they said they'd contact him if need be. And then I felt someone holding my hand. I knew it wasn't the nurse, because they have a continual conversation with you. And I really felt peaceful with this, holding this hand. And then I must have kind of dozed off to sleep or something, because it was like the next day after that. And then eventually I was coming out of whatever I was in, and I was more aware, and I could actually kind of start communicating with my eyes. And then Paul came back, and then I went on, like 2 days later I went on the main ward,
So who was it holding your hand then?
Jesus.
Right.
My Lord Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was him, definitely him. So and then we stayed in Biggin Hill for about 9 years, and we were asked if we'd like to help Norm and Carol Blaze come over here to church plant, because people have been coming from Seven Oaks, a small group, for a couple of years, and the pastors and elders were satisfied that things could happen here. So we came, and we weren't going to move here. We were actually going to move towards Bromley for Paul's job, but we liked Seven. We walked around the town one evening on our way to house group, liked it, and so like 34 years we're still here.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a very powerful moment for you then. So you went from being not an atheist, but someone who was perhaps resistant to finding out about God, and then 8 days later you're actively praying to Him, and it sounds like those prayers were answered.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, I've thought about it like a child, sometimes something desperate happens to a child and all they want is the parent, and my parents were living up north at the time, but I just knew I had to talk to God about my situation at that time.
Yeah, okay. And do you put the fact that you're sitting here talking to me now down to Him saving you? Because that sounded like a life and death situation that you were in.
Yes, I think it would, because I don't know I would have had the peace and the calmness if I'd kind of woken up as I had done. And I don't know, I may have had health issues afterwards, which I haven't got. And so, and I don't even know if Joanna would have survived. But, I mean, it was... because when that time, there was no emailing, texting, anything like that, because it just didn't exist. Yeah. So people, it was just word of mouth and telephone, and people stopped work or whatever they were doing, and they would just pray.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I can speak on behalf of a lot of people here that we're jolly glad that prayer did get answered, and now you're in Seven Oaks. So you've been here now for 30 years. Tell us about the church then that you did plant, or you did assist to sort of like plant here, and perhaps you can tell, why you're actually at Vine Evangelical Church now, which is different from the one that you planted.
It is. We started off in the old rundown hotel in the back rooms. We used to do exercises in the winter to keep warm.
Right.
We'd stop mid-service and do some exercises to keep warm. And then we did a lot of outreach. and church grew. Obviously it had its ups and downs, but it got to the point, sort of like about 25 years we'd been there, and we just knew and felt it was time to move on. You know, we'd done what we came over here to do, and there'd been change of leadership and stuff, and so we went to another church plant actually in Borough. But after about 18 months or so, it had been going for a while, but after about 18 months of us being there, it was called back to its main church in Tunbridge Wells because things just haven't grown enough sufficiently. And then at the same time, Paul's uncle, who we'd been caring for at Kippington nursing home, he passed away, and it had all been quite traumatic, and so we had a bit of time out, and then we knew we needed to find fellowship, and so we went over to the Vine over there.
To the Baptist church?
Yeah, just by the Baptist church there. I sat on the
sorry, you went to, I beg your pardon. Yeah, you went to the Vine cricket ground.
There.
Yeah.
We prayed together, and then we prayed individually. And then we both stood up, and we just watched the comings and the goings of the two churches, because you could see what was happening. And overall, independently...
I'm just going to put that into context for anyone watching who may not be a member of Vine Evangelical Church. Literally just over the road, 20 metres over the road, is another church called Vine Baptist Church. So I just wanted to get that into context there.
And so, we just watched, and we saw that there was a variety. There was different families, older, different generations coming here. And so we just said, we'll come over here. So we just walked over, and that's when we, that was like.
And so that was about 6 years ago now. Yeah.
And of course, we just kind of settled in, really, I suppose.
Well, you certainly have. So, what is it that what's appealing about the church to you?
The church.
Yeah.
What you mean, God's wide?
The church. Sorry, the church in general, and then specifically Vine Evangelical Church.
Okay. Well, I suppose it's love and just the knowledge that we've got a purpose here, eternal life, that we're not just amassing stuff that's going to rot, and just being caring and just knowing that we have a relationship with God, the Creator, and just that really.
Okay. And then specifically about Vine Evangelical Church, what is it that keeps you here?
What keeps us here? Well, I can walk from my house.
That's always a good thing, yeah.
The people, I mean, it's family. I mean, it's a family you can choose in a way. You don't normally choose your natural family, but here and just, being able to encourage people and just see church family grow and be more adventurous and outgoing and stuff.
And what would you say is the because we are in the middle of the pandemic, which is something that I've knitted to tell the listeners to start with. It's now July the 23rd 2020, and just as a reminder, I'm still 1 metre plus away from Beverley at the moment, and it will have to stay that way because of the government guidelines. But what would you say is the biggest challenge in your life at the moment because of the pandemic that's going on at the moment?
I think it's getting to love Zoom, if I'm truthful.
Right, okay.
Yeah, because I like. Yeah, I think getting to love Zoom, that's my big...
Having to meet people online rather than face-to-face, in the flesh, as they say. Okay. And in terms of So you've obviously been married now to Paul for how many years now? Are we allowed to know that? Is that classified information, or is that
14.
Yeah, and do you believe that your coming together was God's creation for you? Was it God's design for you?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if Paul thinks sometimes. yeah, it was. I mean, we mellowed together, and yeah, it was. I mean, I think possibly there's one other couple we know, and out of the time when we got married, that are still married, and others have divorced. So, yeah.
What do you think your life would be like if you hadn't have taken that decision, all those years ago to accept God?
Well, I think my life would have been pretty miserable, but as I don't know what sort of life. I think if I hadn't known God when I had Joanna, I probably wouldn't have had a life.
Yeah.
But I think I'd be pretty miserable, really.
Okay. So, Beverley, I have to say, and I think others would say in this church as well, you have a very open and fantastic relationship with God. We've seen that you're an absolute advocate of praying out loud and that. Could you just give us some background, what led you to that, and what it actually does for you, and what you think it hopefully does for other people in the family?
Yeah. Well, when I was in Biggin Hill growing up in my Christian life, there was lots of talk about ladies in the Outer Hebrides that sort of prayed and initiated the starting of the revival there. And I thought, I want to be a prayer warrior. I really want to pray like they did. And I know I've done that all through my Christian life, because I've prayed and I've asked God sometimes how to pray about different things. And also what happened to me when I had Joanna, and I had to learn to lean on God, because he was not as a crutch, but as my help and my saviour, and someone to direct me and keep me safe. And I have a good relationship with him, and that's what I wanted to encourage their church to have a relationship with God, trust in him, and just know that you can talk to him as your Heavenly Father, and that he will answer you, and maybe not the way you want or anticipated, maybe not even the time span you wanted, but by asking him, that is the initiation of the relationship and of him working in your life. And
you truly believe that, don't you?
Yes, yeah.
And you've seen many examples happening in your life. Could you give us a few more examples, or just one other example of when your prayer has been answered? My sister sadly passed away about 10 years ago. She had breast cancer, and during that time she knew we were praying for her, because I told her countless times, and I spoke to her about God. And it got to the point, because my sister and my family live up in Cheshire, I visited her as much as I could, but near the end I couldn't. But at her funeral, her husband stood up and said that Sally had made a commitment to God, and I didn't quite believe it. But anyway, I checked it out with my daughter and son-in-law and Paul at the end of the funeral, and it was. And it turned out that Sally, on my words, had gone to the church nearby and started to pray and talk to God. Wow.
And she actually made a commitment.
Wow.
And
was that a few weeks before she died, or was that years before she died?
No, just a few weeks.
Just a few weeks?
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's been other little incidents. There was a time when we first moved here, Paul's boss decided not to pay Paul, because Paul had done his work, hit targets, etc., but for some unknown reason he decided he wasn't going to pay Paul. So we prayed about it, even the children who were about 6 and 7. We all prayed, sat down and prayed. And then for that month that Paul wasn't paid, we got envelopes through the door regularly. It was, exciting. And then
I take it those envelopes had money in it.
Yes, they had money or cheques.
Yeah.
And we gave 10%. I know after what Glenn said, but anyway, we gave 10% of that each week, and we still got more. And when we totalled up at the end of the month, we actually had more money than we normally have.
From Paul's wages?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, sometimes God hasn't answered my prayers, and He's taught me some lessons through not answering my prayers. And even though...
How do you feel when you know that a prayer hasn't been answered in your way?
Well, the first time that happened to me, a major prayer, I behaved like a 2-year-old. I kicked and I screamed. But then God gave... I was in Cornwall on holiday, and God just put His arms around me. He showed me a picture of Him, and He had His arms around me, and He was just as you would do to a 2-year-old that's having a hissy fit. You just surround them with your arms and your love to calm them down, give them peace and reassurance, and that's what He did, and that was a big lesson there.
So you're still learning?
Yeah, still learning. We'll learn forever, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, all right, Beverley. Well, thank you very much indeed for that, can I say, very powerful testimony, especially from someone who went through such a potentially life-changing illness when you were pregnant and that. And thankfully, it all worked out fine in the end. So thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you to everyone who's been watching Beverley and I have this conversation. And if there's anything that you would like to know more, then at the end of this video there will be some contact details. Please send in any question that you've got, or pick up the phone of the phone number. And that's goodbye from us here at Vine Evangelical Church here in Sevenoaks, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.